In 1837, Queen Victoria comes to the throne in England, and her reign will be so influential, the entire 19th century is named after her, even in countries that weren't English colonies at the time. She had a huge influence on fashion. She is most remembered for the widespread use of the colors white and black in women's wardrobes. She was a much more conservative dresser than you would normally see in a monarch at the time, so another of her influences was steering royal fashion away from elaborate styles toward middle-class fashions with wider appeal to the populace, a tradition that continues today in her great-great-granddaughter, Elizabeth II. Although fashion began to change very rapidly, we will divide the early 19th century into two major silhouettes. For those who might wish to be serious costume historians, it is more accurate to divide these years into three silhouettes, but we will simplify our study. The first silhouette spans approximately 1820 to 1835. The soft silhouette at the end of the neoclassical era will stiffen. Shoulders will widen and puff. The neckline and waistline will follow horizontal lines. The waistline will drop to just above the natural waist, and the skirt will widen at the hem. The early Romantic silhouette will resemble two triangles for an X-shape effect, although you will see rounded sleeves and hairstyles. In the 1830s, this silhouette will continue to widen, adding more roundness, but the small waist, wide shoulders, and wide hips will keep the X shape. A signature style of the early Romantic era is an astounding amount of applied details added to the bodices and hems. Sleeves will be long or short and will be very fanciful during this era, but always including a large puff either just at the shoulder or in the entire sleeve. This widening silhouette will require several layers of underpinnings to support those shapes. Women will wear one layer against their skin of a chemise and drawers. In this era, drawers become invisible, worn for modesty, not for fashion. The chemise will shrink from a knee-length garment to a short blouse-like garment. Next, women wore a corset. This is now a long garment that fits all the way over the hips. Gussets, or triangles, added to the fabric make room for the bust and the hips. As this era advances, more and more bones will be added to the laced corset. Notice the ideal body shape is to separate the breasts with flat bones or fabric in between. This sketch from the period shows the ideal effect with a flat space between the breasts, most evident in the plaid dress on the left. This continues the more natural female form left from the neoclassical era, but much more restrained and modest. Corset bones were made with cording and increasingly baleen or whalebone. Technically, it is not a bone, it is made of materials similar to our fingernails. To hold the large skirts, women wore several layers of petticoats. As the skirts widened, women added more. By the 1830s, the skirts had widened enough that more layers could not hold the skirts out in the right shape. Petticoats were stiffened with small horizontal ropes called cording. Some petticoats were quilted. Extremely large sleeves were supported by sleeve plumpers, which could be made as small cages or stuffed pillows worn around the arm. In 1835, we begin the second silhouette. The wide shoulders and puff sleeves will deflate into round, soft shoulders. Bodices will change from a horizontal neckline to styles that emphasize a V shape. The whole effect, however, is circular with round hair, round hats, shoulders, lower sleeves, and skirt. Imagine the visual weight of this style melting downward. This is a modified figure 8 style. The bodice will begin to point at the waist in the late 1830s, and by the late 1840s, the entire torso will visually elongate past the natural waistline, with a longer point in front. This second silhouette is the result of a fashion revival looking back to the English Civil War in the 1600s, when the English King Charles was dethroned and killed by Protestant rebels, briefly banishing a monarchy in England. During the 1830s, the British upper class was once again locked in a battle with workers who wanted reforms from the excesses of the Industrial Revolution and from landowners. The Cavalier Revival looked back to another era that faced this struggle. You can see examples of Cavalier on the right. We will see the rounded shoulder shape of the 1600s return with the appearance of the sleeves sliding down the arm. The skirts also widen. Women's hair will also imitate the Cavalier era, with half the hair worn up and hair around the face curled. On the extreme left, you can see a 17th century style. In the middle and on the right, the copies of the Cavalier style. This era could be considered the golden age of the sleeve, and we will see sleeves reach huge proportions. The long puffed sleeve on the left is called a gigot, also called a leg of mutton due to its resemblance to that cut of meat. The half-puff version is called a demi-gigot. Both sleeve styles appear to be pulling the bodice to the side and sliding down the arm. The textbook lists 4 major styles of sleeves, so make note of those. The style on the left here is a Marie sleeve. It is a full puffed sleeve that is then wrapped several times to form smaller puffs. On the right, we have an example of a sheer oversleeve worn in evening dresses. You can see a small puff sleeve underneath at the shoulder. This era loved sleeves so much they sometimes wore 2. Fashion plates are now widely available in ladies' magazines, leading to an explosion of design options. The number of bodice styles is staggering. This marks a huge change from the 18th century. We now have a general population that can read and magazines that travel far and wide by subscription. This example shows the simplest bodice, a plain bodice with a row of lace framing the chest and shoulders. These examples show pleating from the shoulders that smooths into a fitted waistline. Notice the horizontal band of fringe added on the upper arm. This is a Turkish style of detail. These examples show broad V necklines from shoulder to shoulder, with the bust line covered in additional pleating or gatherings. These bodices imitate a man's shirt and waistcoat shape with a V neckline. Caped collars were common, as were bodices that opened down the front like a jacket. Notice the second set of sleeves on the right, short over long with a fringe effect. This decoration is called smocking, and it was a favorite trim used on bodices. There was a very distinct bodice style in the late 1830s and 40s that created a corset-like effect with a blouse tucked into it. This was all one bodice, not 2 layers, but you can see how tightly this style fits. These women all wear a hairstyle that began in the 1840s that covered the ears with soft wings. Hair was parted in the center. One signature styling for this era is how closely the bodices fit the shoulders. The shoulder of the bodice appears to melt down onto the top of the arm. This close fit prevented fashionable women from lifting their arms very high, enhancing the fact they were not working for a living among a growing population that toiled long hours. As dresses inflated, outer coats also widened. The day coat or pelisse remains, but changed its shape to cover the dress, seen on the right. They were expensive, however, so many women wore a shaped shawl called a pelerine. You can see that shawl-like garment on the two women at the left. It has long tails that hang down the front. Large styles like this, worn outdoors, were called pelerine mantelets. Indoors, women wore pelerines over their shoulders for warmth or decoration. The collar style is sometimes called a Bertha collar in English. We also see here an example of a day cap worn inside. Both of these accessories were a way to add decoration to a day dress. The signature hat from this era is the bonnet, which formed a round frame around the face. Recall that an element of the bonnet is the brim with very little crown. These were highly decorated with ribbons, flowers, and lace. One of the fashion pace setters for this era was Marie Taglioni, an Italian ballet star. She had a huge following of fans. She adapted the evening wear of this era as a stage costume. Other ballet companies copied her, establishing the romantic tutu. In this presentation, we have seen women's fashions leave neoclassical simplicity behind. Within 30 short years, gowns grow larger and softer with elaborate dressmaker details. Women also returned to the corset and structured petticoats just like the aristocrats of the 17th century used to wear.